Hi everyone, my name is Nikki and welcome to my YouTube channel Ada Canada. Today's topic is going to be all about proof of funds for your study permit for international students out there about to enter into Canada to start your education. So I'm going to be giving you all the information that you need to know, how much money you need to have in your bank statement, what other kinds of things that you need to show as part of your proof of funds. It's all going to be under this whole topic in this video, so please do stick around to the end, like this video and subscribe to my channel. So first things first, for those of you who don't know, maybe you're not aware, you don't know what proof of funds is, the simplest way to describe proof of funds is that it is a physical evidence, a physical financial evidence that you as the applicant will demonstrate to IRCC when you are applying for your study permit, or it could even be a work permit, it could even be permanent residency. So whatever thing that you have going on with Canadian immigration that requires you to show proof of funds, it's simply a physical financial evidence. And the reason they are asking or requesting you to show them this evidence is that they want to be sure that you will not be a liability when you come into Canada. They want to be sure that you will be able to sustain yourself, because trust me, it's really not easy if you don't have any financial means to support yourself in Canada. It's not going to be an easy road. That is what proof of funds is. We're going to now move forward to the next thing on the list, which is the different ways that you can demonstrate that financial capacity. According to the Government of Canada website for study permit applications, the first way of showing or providing a proof of funds in your study permit application is to open a Canadian bank account in your name and transfer money for your tuition. Basically, it's exactly as it is. You open a Canadian bank account, which I'm not sure if you can actually do this online from outside Canada, but you simply open a Canadian bank account and then transfer money into that Canadian bank account that will be the equivalent of your tuition. This is not necessarily mandatory, okay? If you are able to open a bank account and move money for your tuition in Canadian dollars, then fine. If you cannot open a bank account from where you are outside of Canada, don't stress, okay? It's not necessarily mandatory for you to have a bank account before you enter into Canada. You can always open a Canadian bank account when you come into Canada. I believe the process might even be easier for you to do, because then you can see a financial services advisor or someone from the bank directly, and you will better be able to provide required documentation such as a proof of address, like a Canadian address or ID card or something, right? Something. So it's easier to open a bank account when you're inside of Canada than when you're outside of Canada where they cannot see you. The second way of showing your proof of funds or providing your proof of funds in your study permit application is a GIC from a Canadian financial institution. A GIC is a guaranteed investment certificate. In some other countries, they call it a fixed term deposit or a fixed deposit. It's basically the equivalent of a fixed term deposit. It's a form of investment that you make that offers a guaranteed rate of return over a fixed period of time. This GIC certificate is issued by Canadian trust companies or Canadian financial institutions that have this kind of services. Virtually almost all Canadian institutions, financial institutions, banks that I know of have this GIC. So in layman terms or in simpler terms, you simply just put money in an account, like a fixed deposit account, for a certain period of time, which is like your maturity period, and you just don't do anything to it, right? That investment you're putting is going to accrue some sort of interest. There's going to be some sort of rate of return for that fixed period of time. It could be weeks, it could be months, it could be 1 year. In order for you to purchase a guaranteed investment certificate, to the best of my knowledge, you need to actually have a Canadian bank account that is functional for you to do that. So once again, having a GIC, it's not mandatory. If you don't have access to get a GIC investment certificate from a Canadian institution within Canada, don't sweat it. You can also do that when you come into Canada. So the third way of showing or demonstrating proof of funds in your study permit application is proof of student loan from a bank. If you have access to student loans from a bank, then you're going to need to show that evidence of the loan and the bank that is offering you that loan in your study permit application. And this is only if you are coming into Canada on a student loan. The fourth way of demonstrating proof of fund is bank statement for the past 4 months. This appears to be the most important out of everything on this list. This is actually the most important thing. Like, seriously, if you don't have anything else on this list, you should have a bank statement. You must have a bank statement. A bank statement is just a record of financial transactions for a certain period of time. That bank statement has to be the most recent statement within the last 4 months. For example, if you are planning on submitting your study permit application tomorrow, you should have a bank statement that dates back to January or December. Some people actually provide bank statements that are longer than 4 months. I know when I was applying for my study permit, I actually used a bank statement that was about 6 to 8 months long from my sponsor, and that wasn't a problem. Also, one thing that I need to point out here is that when you're providing a bank statement, you have to make sure that there should be inflow and outflow of cash. Don't just provide a bank statement where it's only inflow of cash, meaning there's only money coming in, there's no money going out. The bank statement has to demonstrate that this is an active account, there is money coming into the account, there's also money going out of the account. Maybe not on a daily basis, but there has to be, you know, transactions in and out of that account. So please just beware of that in case you didn't know. I know that so many of you have asked me the question, how much should be in the bank statement? How much do I need in that bank statement? Is this amount of money enough in the bank statement? In order to answer this question, first of all, I'm going to direct you to a table from the Government of Canada website. I can put the link in the description box so that you can explore it further. According to the table, if you're coming in as a student, a single student for that matter, then you need to show up to 10,000 Canadian dollars in your bank statement. Depending on whatever country that you're watching me from, whatever currency that you're using, whichever bank statement that you're using, the equivalent that should be in the account should be 10,000 Canadian dollars. So if you convert whatever currency you have in that account, it has to sum up to 10,000 Canadian dollars. If you are coming in with your spouse, which is like a spousal open work permit that you probably will be applying for your spouse, then you have to add $4,000 extra. And if you're coming in with a dependent is a child, so it's going to be $3,000 extra for each dependent. I have talked about this before in one of my previous videos where I talked about spousal open work permit. So if you haven't seen that video by now, I'm going to have it linked somewhere up there and in the description box. Please go check out that video on spousal open work permit because I talked about bank statements there as well. Here is another thing, and this is just my personal suggestion. You don't have to take my advice if you don't want to, if it's not working for you. But this is just my personal suggestion from my own experience. When I was applying for a study permit, what I did with my sponsor, because I had someone as a sponsor who was providing me with a bank statement. So what I did was I calculated the total tuition that I'm supposed to pay for my program. My program was 1 year. The tuition at the time was around 17,000 Canadian dollars. I had to go and do some background research to figure out how much is the average cost of rent in Alberta, in Edmonton to be precise. Luckily for me, I knew someone who was living in Alberta at that time, and so I sent a message. I'm like, please, can you tell me on average how much does rent cost per month? And then I multiplied that amount by 12. So I think at the time the average cost of rent in Edmonton was $500. And so 500 multiplied by 12 months, which is the duration of my program, 6,000 Canadian dollars for my accommodation. And I was going to add 6,000 Canadian dollars to my tuition. I had to also do some research to figure out how much is the average cost of feeding. So how much am I going to spend on groceries on average in a month? These things are variable and it depends on what you eat and how you eat. So I did understand that, and I also had to do some research again to find out, like, on average, how much am I going to be spending every month? And I think I put that value as $150 or $200 every month on average on groceries, which is feeding. $200, I multiplied it by 12, that is $2,400. I calculated the total cost of the textbooks that I was going to use. I also calculated the total cost of transportation. For transportation, I actually had to go back and do research again. I think at the time it was close to $100, and I multiplied that by 12. I basically broke down everything aside from tuition. I broke down every other component that involves money, and I multiplied it by 12. The total that I came up with was close to 30,000 Canadian dollars. So that's like $10,000 extra added to my tuition. My tuition was almost $18,000. When I calculated the cost for feeding, for transportation, for accommodation, for books, and then I even added miscellaneous expenses, and everything in total that I needed in my bank statement was around $35,000, because it was around $28,000 or $29,000, but by the time I added miscellaneous, it kind of came up to about 35,000 Canadian dollars. You have to understand that back then the currency exchange rate was a lot better. At the time, if you had converted the money that I needed, it was 5 million naira. I needed 5 million naira in a bank statement. All in all, I got way more in my bank statement. So my bank statement was showing an excess of money as opposed to just like 5 million, which is the bare minimum. What I need to point out here is that when you're totaling the amounts that you need in your bank statement, just sit down, take your time, write out what your tuition is, your exact tuition that you're supposed to pay. Then go back and do some research. You can browse online and figure out what will be the average cost of rent in the city that you're moving to, what will be the average cost of feeding, grocery shopping, what will be the average cost of transportation, how much your books are going to cost, and then some miscellaneous expenses. This is what worked for me. It would be nice to have more as opposed to having the bare minimum. There is no guarantee that you will get a study permit approved if you have less than the desired amount or more than the desired amount. However, it's always good to have excess. What you're basically trying to tell the agents, the IRCC agent, whoever is processing your study permit application, is that you have enough to cover and then some. You still have to pray and you still have to like hope for the best even after you've done all that needs to be done. So the next way of providing proof of funds is a bank draft, which can be converted to Canadian dollars. If you have a bank draft from your home country and you are sure that this is something that you can easily convert to Canadian dollars when you make a deposit in Canada, then yes, you can use that as part of your documentation for your proof of funds. Another way of providing proof of funds in your study permit application is a proof of tuition fee and accommodation payments. This aspect is one thing that I think confuses a lot of people because different people are saying different things relative to their experience. In my experience, I don't think it's necessary or mandatory for you to pay your school fees before you come into Canada. Here's the thing. There are some schools that when you pay a certain amount or when you pay tuition, they will not be able to refund you the entire amount that you paid if you don't get a study permit. They won't grant you that refund. Some schools will give you a certain percentage of a refund, and these things take a long time to process. It takes a while to process a refund that is in thousands of dollars because you didn't get a study permit. For example, if your tuition for a semester is 10,000 Canadian dollars and you end up paying 10,000 Canadian dollars before you apply for a study permit, you show the proof that you've paid your tuition, but then you don't get the study permit approved. What it means is that you're going to have to start reaching out to the school to ask for a refund of that money. There are some schools who will not give you back your 10,000 Canadian dollars. So it's going to be like a loss on your part. They might give you a certain percentage, but some won't give you the entire 10,000 Canadian dollars. And even when they decide to give you your refund, it's going to take a long time. So it's not something you're going to receive within the next day because you contacted them today. It's going to take weeks or months before before you can actually get that refund. My best advice is to just not pay your tuition at all until you get your study permit approved, because when you get your study permit approved, it is 100% certain that you are going to come and study in Canada. So you can pay your tuition when you have gotten your study permit approved. If you are someone who has the money to spend and you don't necessarily want to wait until you get your study permit approved, if you have the money, by all means, you can go ahead and pay for the tuition for the semester and use that payment receipt as your proof of funds. If that's what you want to do, that is totally fine. But in my own opinion, I don't think it's necessary for you to do that. I think you should just be patient and wait until you get your study permit approved, so that way you don't end up losing some money if you don't get your study permit approved. That's just my best advice. The next way of providing proof of funds in your study permit application is a letter of explanation from your sponsor or the school who is providing you with the money to come and study in Canada. So I've always said this before, every time that I've talked about proof of funds briefly in my other videos, if you're going to provide a bank statement or whatever kind of financial documents that you want to show as your proof of funds, if it's not coming from you, if it's coming from someone else who is sponsoring you, maybe your father, your mother, your uncle, your auntie, your sister, your brother, whoever it is that has the documents in their name, has to provide you with a letter of sponsorship. It's very simple to draft it out. Have your sponsor write a letter stating that I'm writing this letter in support of this applicant. This is how I know this applicant. This is why I am supporting this applicant, and this is what the applicant is going to study. If you are the person who is providing the applicants with a bank statement, for example, you have to identify if you have any dependents. You have to identify how you know the applicant and in what capacity do you know the applicant. If you're related or if you're not related, you have to also state why you are choosing to sponsor that applicant. So it's really easy. I don't think it's something that's even difficult. You can even do it together with your sponsor. The letter also has to be signed. If it is a school that is providing you with the funding, for example, if you're receiving a research grant or a research funding from a particular department that you're applying to, or from your research supervisor, then the letter of sponsorship for the proof of funds is going to come from that person in the school or from the school itself. They just want you to show in writing who the person is that is providing you with that bank statement and is sponsoring your education in Canada. The next way of providing proof of funds for your study permit application is proof of funding paid from within Canada. That is, if you have a scholarship or are in a Canadian funded educational program. This is the category where scholarships fall into. If you receive a scholarship from the school, whatever kind of scholarship, whatever amount of scholarship, you have to provide that proof. When you apply for a scholarship, or if it's a scholarship by merit where you are awarded just based on your grades, the school or the organization is going to send you a letter of award or something. They are going to notify you. That letter that you get is what you have to add as part of your application documents when you are applying for your proof of funds. I had this question, I think it was last week, that someone asked me in my question tag if they can use a scholarship as a replacement for proof of funds, and by proof of funds this person meant a bank statement. My response is still no. So if you receive a scholarship from a school or from an organization and you have that letter of scholarship, that is not going to replace your bank statement that you need. You're still going to have to provide a bank statement in your study permit application. Let's just be guided, okay? Don't just use only a scholarship letter that is provided from a school. Add a bank statement to your application. The reason why I say this is because sometimes when you receive a scholarship, the amount of scholarship they are giving you is probably only going to cover your tuition. So you're still going to need to show that you have the money to pay rent in Canada. You're still going to need to show that you have money to transport yourself to school. You're still going to need to show that you have the money to feed yourself in Canada. So if you only have that scholarship scholarship that says that they are only covering your tuition, how are you going to provide evidence of financial capacity for the rest? This is where I'm trying to make my point, in the fact that if you have a scholarship letter, if you have funding, if you have scholarship, full tuition, fully funded, whatever is the case, please add a bank statement as well with your application documents for your study permit. The last way of providing proof of funds, and this wasn't even written in the website which I've been explaining this information from, but this is something that personally helped me, and I'm just going to tell you guys because there's no hoarding of information here. The last way of providing proof of funds is evidence of physical assets. Physical assets like landed properties. If you have land, if you have the deeds to a land, if you have some form of physical asset, or if your sponsor has landed properties or has houses, real estate, investment properties, or something that is physical, to provide an evidence of physical assets, add them to your application, because that was what I did. I didn't have a landed property at the time I was applying, but my sponsor did. I feel like it helped. So now that I have listed all of these different ways of providing proof of funds for your study permit application, you might be wondering, do I need to show all of them? What if I don't have everything? Relax. If you don't have everything, it's fine. Use whatever it is that you have. Anything that you feel is important to show your proof of funds to the IRCC, please add it, because you never know which one's going to work in your favor. However, with that being said, even if you don't have everything that I've listed for you, the most important ones that you really must have is the bank statement. That is the most important. Either you're using your bank statement or your sponsor's bank statement, you must have your bank statement, and you must have a letter of explanation from your sponsor if it is your sponsor that is providing you with a bank statement. So we have come to the end of this video. This is all the information that I wanted to unpack here for you guys in your study permit application. I hope that you found this information helpful and useful. Please like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, it's really important. Please hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell notification so that you will be notified anytime I upload a video. I will see you guys in my next video. Stay safe. Bye.